It is great to be here. This is, as you know, a virtual event and hopefully one of our last virtual events. We're hoping to come live with our next program. We'll have much more on that coming up sometime very soon. For our regulars, welcome back. For those of you who are new to our programming, welcome. It is good to have you. My name is Andy Trinan. I am the president and CEO here at the Fraser History Museum. I'm also the host of our bourbon programming. And as the official starting point of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, it is our role to give you one-of-a-kind experiences, outstanding experiences with some of the stars in the bourbon industry and kind of a peek behind the curtain. And with that, I want to introduce you to the star of tonight's program. She is the Assistant Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve and a very good friend of mine, Elizabeth McCall. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, Andy. Thank you for having me.
Hey, we're about a week away from Derby, a time that gets absolutely crazy for you. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready. I mean, it's crazy here. Do you need me to put on a fascinator? I have a fascinator.
Well, if you'd like to put it on, I mean, I think you look outstanding with or without.
No, I'm kidding.
Hey, let's start there because one of the things that Elizabeth does each year is give a toast right before Kentucky Derby to literally millions of people. So I thought that would be an appropriate place for us to start. So here's my toast. Some ships are wooden ships, but those ships may sink. The best ships are friendships, and to those ships, we drink. So to our guest this evening, everybody raise a glass. Let's get started. To Elizabeth McCall, a toast this evening.
Wonderful toast. Thank you.
Hey, let's talk about that a little bit, Elizabeth. It's a pretty big deal to give a toast before the Kentucky Derby. You're on NBC. It is a national, international audience. Tell me about that experience and the first time you had to go through it.
Yes, it is such a huge honor. I get so energized by it. It's like the first year, I'll just talk about the first year doing it because it was 2018. And if you go back to that Derby, it was the wettest Kentucky Derby on record. And we were all standing in the tunnel where the horses normally come out and we're cheering, we're getting excited and everybody's pumped up. And then we finally get out to the winner's circle and we're standing there. I have my husband, Matt McCall, who's on the board at the Fraser. He's standing beside me. He's like, I can't believe we're down here doing this. And I'm standing there ready and they're like, start counting down 30 seconds. And I'm just like cool as a cucumber. And they're like, and they're counting. And I'm like, am I going to get a mic? Like I say, the producer for NBC, I'm like, am I going to get a mic? He's like, you don't have your microphone? What's going on? And I'm like, no, nobody handed it to me. And so Matt is sweating bullets for me. And I'm just like, I figured they had it, they knew what they were doing. They had it under control and they gave me the mic in 5 seconds, boom, time to go. And it was, I mean, I get goosebumps talking about it now. So cool, such a rush. You got the whole Churchill Downs there, but then 9 million people watching and, and then you get done and everybody's cheering and it was like, I nailed it. I did it. Now let's go have a drink.
Yeah, you do such an outstanding job and we're going to take folks through your career. Derby last year, obviously very different, didn't happen in the spring, did happen in the fall and September. What are you expecting next week?
It is going to be different still. We're going to be limited capacity, but I'm so grateful that we will be back at the track, celebrating, watching the horses run. I will be there both Oaks and Derby Day in my finest, but the pomp and pageantry won't be on full display this year because there's no red carpet, there's none of that. But still so excited to get dressed up and celebrate the day on the first Saturday of May.
Yeah, the timing is right. Probably be next year before we get that full Derby experience. Let's set up tonight's experience. Want to let people know how the program is going to go. If you paid for the program, you've got your signed Woodford Reserve bottle. You got your tasting glass. You have your horseshoe, which is outstanding. And you also have these 6 things that we're going to taste tonight. Elizabeth is going to lead us through that tasting. So with each one of these things, there are different variances that she's going to point out in the bourbon, and we're going to weave some conversation through that as well. So if you are one of our paid customers, enjoy that. If you're at home or you're watching on Facebook Live, grab your bottle of Woodford Reserve and fake it. Come along with us and experience this as we go. Let's start with that, and we'll start with the cheese.
Yes.
Because when I moved to Kentucky, one of the first things I did in diving into bourbon was to go out to Woodford Reserve and go through the tasting wheel. And everybody has a wheel with them as well. I thought it was such an amazing, cool experience. Similar probably to when you go to Napa and you taste some bacon fat with the red wine, and it pulls the tannins out. Bourbon does the same thing. So when you walk someone through the tasting wheel and you start with the cheese, what do you want them to know?
So what I want them to know is that the cheese is very fatty. This is Parmesan cheese. It's aged. It is concentrated flavor, and it's got a lot of fat notes. So when you chew, I want you to take a small bite of your cheese, let it fully coat your palate, and then take a sip of your Woodford Reserve. And everybody raised their glass and had to toast with us. So we've all already wet our palates with a little taste of the Woodford. So let's see how it shifts it. So the fat is going to block some of the ethanol, and it should shift the way it tastes on your palate. And I just love it because it's, you know, people always talk about doing wine and cheese pairings, but a bourbon and cheese pairing is a wonderful pairing to do. So let me know what you think.
I think it's outstanding.
Mm-hmm. And for me, you know, I mean, it softens the ethanol so you don't see that big punch there, and it allows you to experience the flavors of Woodford, and there are over 200 flavors in a glass. So you're going to experience a lot of different things. Some people get more nutty characteristics. Sometimes I go to toasted coconut or a pineapple note. So it just kind of, it can go creamy. It can be whatever, because that's the beauty of Woodford, is that it really can be anything to anybody.
We're going to get more into your palate and how you trained and got into this job in a little bit. But first of all, it has been a very strange year for all of us, obviously, with COVID-19 and the pandemic. But it's also been a wonderful year for you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pop Winnie up there and tell me about this as your everyday wake up experience with your daughter.
Yes. So that's our little Winnie Rose. So yes, I do have a WR. So not only do I have Woodford Reserve, but I have my own little Winnie Rose McCall, and she is now 9 months old, and she is like our pride and joy. I mean, I thought parenthood was going to be amazing, but it's better than I ever expected. So I love it. We wake up usually. She's an early rise, I mean, 6:30, 7-ish, but she sleeps like 11 hours a night. So she's amazing. I am so lucky that she sleeps well. But yeah, we get up and we hang out and play, and then it's off. She goes to school 5 days a week. So that's really nice. So
I know how involved your job is and how it consumes your time both during a work day and outside of a work day. This year, not quite as much, because you were forced to be home. I can't think of a better year to be forced to be home.
It was the silver lining, because normally I would have been traveling a lot or had evening events, and like tonight I'm doing an evening event, but I could go, okay, bye Winnie, I'll be back in, an hour and a half. And then I go upstairs and I can still put her to bed, and there's no commute. It's such a wonderful thing in such a bad year that's had a lot of bad things happen. I had my silver lining.
Well, that's pretty darn good silver lining. So congratulations to you and Matt, who also is one of our board members here at the Fraser. We appreciate you both very much. Let's talk a little bit about how you got here. You spent some time in Cincinnati as a child, as I did. And it's kind of interesting that you now work intimately with the Kentucky Derby, because you've loved horses your entire life.
Yes. I grew up in Cincinnati, which is not a horse place that you think of, oh, you're going to take riding lessons. And I got inspired by a TV show that was on the Disney Channel when I was little, and it was set in the 1800s, and they rode horses everywhere. And I was like, Mom, I want to do that. And so she found me a place in Cincinnati to start riding. And then we moved down to Kentucky, and everybody was like, you're going to love Kentucky. There are horses everywhere, 4-board fences everywhere. And it is true. I mean, and I feel like I'm a very authentic Kentuckian, and because I ride horses, I still own a horse, and I drink bourbon for a living, and I'm a fan of basketball. So like, what more can you get?
Yeah, and you're for those who don't know, Ballard High School in the house.
Ballard High School.
Represented by Ballard High School. Little bit represented by UK.
Yeah.
You spent some time there, and then went to the University of Louisville, where you got a psychology degree and then a postgraduate counseling psychology degree. Makes perfect sense that you work as an assistant master distiller. How the heck did you get from one to the other?
Yeah, people always wonder that. They assume you have a degree in chemistry or something more technical, engineering wise. And I weaseled my way in basically because psychology gives you methodology. So I have my master's in it. So I have the methodology on how to set up experimentation using human beings as your instrument, which is what sensory is. It's understanding human response to our products, so beverage alcohol in our case, and then also the statistical analysis needed to understand what does that data mean. So, I mean, in the sensory world, a colleague and I were joking that people usually think, oh, you just go to work and you drink bourbon all day. But that's not, I do get to drink bourbon at my job, but it's not just a sit and sip and hang out. It is, we're doing it with a purpose. And there's a method behind the madness and trying to understand what's going on in that bottle from a quality standpoint or just a flavor standpoint.
One of the things that I think is so cool about your story is that you grew up here in high school, middle school, high school on, so all of your friends see you in your current role. And so that's pretty cool. I would guess when they see you, at doing what you do at Woodford Reserve or at the Kentucky Derby, you get some real positive feedback on that. And part of them is like, how in the heck did Elizabeth from Ballard High School end up being on international television on NBC?
Yeah, I get that a lot. And, it's really funny that because I think behind doing tastings like this, and I have people that text me like, oh, you're going to be my celebrity for whatever. And I find that hilarious because I'm the farthest thing from a celebrity or any of that. And I think my friends all keep me humble. They don't really ask me about my job. I mean, they do, but they don't. It's whatever. But I think I look back, we had this superlative book from when I was a senior, and it was like, where do I want to be in 10 years? And my 10-year goal was like, I hope I have a job that I like so I can go on vacation once a year and get to hang out and still riding horses. And I'm like, well, I set the bar pretty low. So all I had to do, I had minimal things. And I'm like, wow, I really overachieved. I feel like that's sums me up in a lot of ways, is that I usually am like, oh, I'm just going to do this, but I usually go there. So
yeah. You've got that inner drive. So just for the record, so we can close the book on this, did you get a vacation last year?
A vacation?
Yeah, because that was your goal, to have a vacation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did. Well, yeah, I was like, well, we didn't physically go anywhere, but I did some staycationing, COVID.
Yeah.
I did staycation.
Let's dive into the nuts, which is our next tasting. And fortunately, a lot of the folks who are joining us are doing it in pairs. They have 2 tasting glasses, and they have a couple who can share this experience together.
Yes. All right. So
it would seem to me that these 2 are kind of similar in what they're pulling out, no?
Yeah, I mean, they pull out woodiness. So the nut, you want to make sure it's a toasted nut that is, I mean, you can have like a salted nut or one that has other flavors on it. But really, to do this pairing, it's a toasted nut, which is sort of like toasting our barrels, where we heat them up and it pulls out the flavor. It's like, it brings all those flavor notes to the surface, coats your palate nicely. So for me, when I have the toasted nuts, I get peanut butter, I'll get almond, pecan, cashew, and even, again, those toasted coconut notes, creaminess. It just kind of goes on and on. Some of the grain notes, that malt character comes out too. So it's a really, really fun pairing to do.
I don't know if I believe in the power of suggestion. It's like peanut butter came flying at me when you said peanut butter. Yes. Is there something to that, the power of suggestion, or are you really just pointing out what's there?
There's 100% power of suggestion is a thing. I mean, we think about it, and especially when we're doing sensory, it's a big deal if you're trying to do like this would not be a very good way to do a study on the flavor profile of Woodford Reserve, having me make suggestions, because your brain is going to see that and know or find it. So yeah, power of suggestion is a real thing, and we definitely, it's part of the thing. But I try to give people the platform to not, I don't always want to suggest things, because I want you to experience it on your own.
Yeah, you started in a lab doing quality control and making sure there were certain variances. Was there a time early in your career where you were like, I don't get it. I get burned. I don't get the banana that I'm supposed to taste in Old Forester, or have you always kind of had that gift?
You know, I think I've always kind of had it. Because I think back to, especially with Jack Daniel's, I mean, that is such a distinctive product, and I get banana note. I mean, Jack Daniel's, their yeast strain is so much banana, and it was just something that I've always been able to really pick out. And I don't think I realized it was a talent or a skill until I started working at Brown-Forman and it was useful. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. But there were times I did have to develop and train my palate. So it's not like I just got everything. We did extensive training with aroma jars, and even opening up the spice cabinet and identifying what the true difference between cinnamon and clove and nutmeg. I mean, those always get like clumped together. And so I think it's important that you really sit down and do your homework. So that's a piece of it too.
And you know, I have a refined palate is not really a skill that you can brag about in middle school.
No.
Because nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Or high school. But if you get into a profession like you're in now, it's like, oh my gosh, she has the talent. So Woodford Reserve, the most balanced and complex bourbon on the market. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a big claim, but it's really what Woodford Reserve is rooted in. And so Distiller Select Bourbon, it is balanced across all 5 areas of flavor. When we say that, we mean bourbon had the bourbon category. If you look at any flavor wheel, they always have grain character, wood character, fruit and floral is clumped together, sweet aromatics, and spice. So your flavor wheels have all 5 areas, and they're all in perfect balance. So each pie slice is equal to the other one. And what that means is I like to think of Woodford Distiller Select Bourbon as sort of a diamond. You know, a diamond is like a clear stone, but when the light hits it a certain way, you see an array of colors. And that's the same thing with Woodford, is that it's good quality bourbon, but some days you might get cinnamon first. Some days you might get the fruit notes first. Other days, maybe the wood or the sweet aromatics, but they're each going to then, all the other areas are going to present themselves. So it's just kind of, it's all in balance. It's like a ball, just kind of there.
Let's take it back to kind of how you got here in your first job at Woodford Reserve, because that quality control, that consistency was something that you were fascinated with, and really started working to try to hone and improve for the brand, for the company. And you're an entry level position here, but you didn't just do what was told. You thought, how can we make this a little bit better? How can we be more consistent?
Yeah. So when I first got my job, I was a sensory technician, didn't know that whiskey was clear before it went into the barrel. I knew nothing. And so once I kind of got my grips on what I was doing when I showed up day to day, I wanted to know more. I wanted to keep pushing the envelope and trying to further my knowledge. I'm a person who doesn't like to have to depend on other people to do things for me. So I try to learn how to do them and be as independent as possible. So my husband can probably attest to that. Very independent, but it really got me to where I am today, because I was going to our quality people and saying, hey, I want to go and connect with our global production facilities, and I want to improve our quality program across all sites. And I want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. I want to make sure that they know that I'm here as a support system, not a big brother. I'm trying to find issues with your quality program. I'm not seeking out problems. I'm seeking out ways to improve it and to help and support. And so I had a big mouth and a lot of big ideas. And luckily I had managers who could help rein it in and make it manageable so I could actually achieve those goals. And so I'm very fortunate. I had the right people in my corner supporting me.
Everybody sees the glitz and the glam, and that's why you're on this program here tonight. But you told me in our pre-interview that it's the production folks that you most relate to. It's the people in the lab, it's the people in the production of the product that you every day relate to the most. Why is that?
Because those are the people that they knew me when I was nobody, and gave me crap when I was nobody, and made fun of me when I was nobody. And then when I got into a more high profile job, they still give me crap. They still put me in my place. They still expect me to pack my own samples, pull my own samples, even though one of my good friends, he at the distillery always tries to do it for me or help me. And I'm like, Daryl, stop. I can do it myself. But just so many good people. And those are the people I just want to make proud. And I want them to know that I try my best to represent them. And they're who have loved me all through it all. And I love my marketing team too. I don't want to put them down or anything, because I love them. But those are the people who knew me when I was just Eli running around the lab doing who knows what.
Doing your lab work in your white coat.
Yep.
You get to have so many amazing experiences through this job, and it's one of the amazing things, awesome things about Brown-Forman and Woodford Reserve. You get to have experiences you wouldn't have dreamed of having. Do you have a favorite part of your job? I get asked that question all the time. And if so, what would it be?
Oh man. I think one of right now we're in Derby season, and as chaotic as it is, and I'm like going a million miles a minute all over the place, I love this part of my job. Like I love when I get to be at the distillery and just kind of incognito, like not get dressed up and just put my head down and work. That's really rewarding. But this has an energy and an excitement around it. And you and I were talking about just live television. I love being on, in media, and I love talking to people about our products and getting people excited. And the energy is just, I feed off of it. I know I'm an extrovert because I really feed off of it. It makes me so excited.
I was trying to remember the first time we met, because it's Louisville, Kentucky. So there are these cross networks, and I worked in television when you came on at Woodford Reserve, but then my wife worked at Brown-Forman, and you worked very closely with her. That to me is what makes Louisville special. Mm-hmm. You can pick up the telephone and call someone at any time and, get a meeting. And there are these benchmarks. Bourbon is, 95% of the bourbon in the world is made here in the state of Kentucky. It's fun to have a real part of that. Do you remember when we first met? I have a hard time.
I don't know if it would have been when you were with WHAS and had I interviewed there, or was it with Wendy backside? I don't know.
It was somewhere on the backside on one of those blurry weekday mornings leading up to Derby, but
with an early mint julep in hand, a 5-minute julep.
And my previous job, the show was on from 5 to 7, so that mint julep was consumed very, very early in the morning.
Yeah.
Just a taste, though.
It's a morning drink. It's meant to be drank in the morning.
I don't want to get you in trouble. I was going to ask you if you like mint juleps. Of course, you love mint juleps, but do you have a favorite bourbon cocktail? Or go ahead.
I love mint juleps. That they have their time and place, and that's in the morning on backside. But my favorite cocktail, I love a Woodford Rye Manhattan served up in a beautiful coupe glass. It's like such a treat, and I don't ever make that for myself very often. I do finally have some beautiful cute coupe glasses that I can make myself a cocktail in, but that is our Woodford Rye and some Carpano Antigua. It's so good. I'm sure you do. Do you have a recipe for that? I do. I mean,
here's what I'm going to make a promise. Everyone watching who purchased this program, we are going to send you in the post email for the event that recipe. So Elizabeth, if you could send me that Manhattan recipe,
okay,
we'll put it on paper and send it out to everybody who's watching, because people are like, oh, I want to try that. I want to make that.
It's so good. It's so good. And you can try to do it with our bourbon too. And it's totally like whenever I'm with friends, I'll order a Manhattan with our bourbon and a Manhattan with our rye. And they both taste really good, but very different in their own way. Because Chris Morris likes to have his Manhattan with bourbon and on the rocks. And I'm rye and up.
So you're Manhattan ahead of the Old Fashioned, Louisville's official cocktail.
Yeah, I am. Manhattan.
All right.
Not the
Interesting.
city.
Let's dive into our citrus, because the first time I experienced this, I was like, oh my gosh, this was the one that really hit it for me, because it almost changed the tasting experience entirely for the bourbon.
Yes, this one is definitely my favorite. And if you're an old fashioned fan, you will love it too. So you want to, with your citrus, you've got your orange slice. I want you to just go ahead and eat the fleshy part first and take a sip of your Woodford Reserve and see how that changes it. Because you're going to see it sharp and bright and just a lot going on with that. And so we'll talk about that and I don't want to give you too many flavor cues, because again, I don't want to influence, but it should seem crisper, like a grapefruit. There's sharpness. You get the orange, you get lemon, you can get lime, but then I want everybody to then express the orange oils onto their palate. So you have your orange slice here. I want you to bend it so bend it sort of like this and just express the orange oils onto your palate. And you can even rub it on your teeth. And I always think,
Okay. I feel
whenever
like
I'm doing
it's
this,
ridiculous, but that's okay.
and you kind of do. And I always think, like, if you're at a bar, how awesome, just go grab the garnishes over the bar and grab an orange and do this. And people will look at you weird, but it is such an amazing tasting.
And it's cheaper than dinner. You know, if you do that at the bar, you just grab
it's like in Pretty Woman, when she goes to the bar and she starts eating, they're like, this isn't a buffet.
It reminds me of my first derby. I was working on the first turn, and we went to Terry Miner's in the infield. Okay. And he did a report on free food that he found at the derby, and he just squirted the mustard into the palm of his hand and started eating.
Oh God.
So you think of Pretty Woman, and I think of Terry Miner's in that. So Terry
Miner's. So next time I talk to Terry Miner's, I'm gonna have to ask him about that, because that is kind
one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Okay, take us back to the expressing of the orange.
Okay, so now you've expressed the orange oils, and I want you to take a sip, because this is where the flavor experience is amazing. To me, it is an old fashioned built in your mouth. What do you think?
I think it's amazing.
I mean, so you get the old fashioned characteristics. It's citrus, it's lemon, lime. Again, it just builds on that, but it even goes to some woody notes, some spice notes. So there's like all this, there's a lot going on, and it really highlights why that orange peel garnish in your cocktail is really so important and such a good, it's not just there to look pretty.
It reminds me of a little secret that I have when I want to really get crazy and change up my Woodford Reserve. I'll just put a couple of orange bitters in there. And it does this exact same thing.
Yeah. And I have some orange bitters too. And like, I do that too, because it just, and that's what bitters do. I mean, bitters are a great way to add to your cocktail, like just to a basic drink. I mean, it elevates anything and is aromatic and all the good things, but it's really, great thing to do. And so that's why I'll just do like an orange slice, or if I have lemons at home, I do that. Pineapple. I mean, any kind of citrus is so good.
Yeah. What I love about Brown-Forman and Woodford Reserve is there are all these different personalities that come together to represent the brands. And one of my favorite is your mentor, Chris Morris. Has been just a statesman, a spokesman for the brand. He's been on our consulting firm for this experience here. You know, the Spirit of Kentucky Bourbon exhibition. He's a historian, and he's such a good guy. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Chris when you first met, and how he has helped to shape your career.
Yeah, Chris has been a tremendous influence in my career. I would not be where I am today without Chris Morris. So yeah, there we are. So Derby celebrations. And I call him my bourbon dad. I love my dad. My dad is still living. Tim O'Neill, I love you. But Morris is my bourbon dad because he's been a mentor and just more than a mentor. I mean, he really has helped me figure out this path and helped me find my voice and been tremendously supportive. So he participates, as do I, in our sensory panel. So the first time I met Chris was when I was working in the lab as a technician. He'd come in and do the panels, and he was the master distiller coming in and doing a tasting panel. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so nervous to even talk to him. And now it's just so funny to think about that. And I met him so in the sensory lab. And then when he first became cognizant of who I am was when I participated in a internal training with him. And it was geared towards sales and marketing folks, but I, again, weaseled my way into that as a production person to learn more about our products. And it was called Distilled Academy. It was how we learned about all of our products. We went to different distilleries. I was the person who, and I wasn't trying to be a brown noser, but I showed up early and I asked a million questions because I worked with our products every single day in a very technical way. So I had a lot of really technical questions for him. And he saw something in me, and that got the ball rolling. And that was in 2014. And that was then that summer I was asked if I wanted to train to be master taster. And I said yes to that opportunity, not knowing what that meant other than I got to hang out with Chris Morris and go and talk to consumers, which is what I was really excited about.
Do you aspire to have your name on a bottle one day?
That would be pretty awesome, Andy. I'm not going to lie. I think that would be pretty cool to have, selected by Master Distiller Elizabeth McCall. That'd be okay. I'd be okay with that.
Well, good luck. I think you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Assistant Master Distiller. Let's talk about, Chris and what he's done for the emergence of this brand. I mean, this is now a worldwide brand. Yep. And it got there in its own right, but also this association with Kentucky Derby didn't help. There's some really smart people at Woodford Reserve and at Brown-Forman who are working to elevate this brand, and Chris is as important as any of them. Yes,
Chris has really been the heart and soul of this. I mean, his creativity, he's not one of, he is the most creative human being I know. His brain never stops. He never stops reading. He never stops learning and growing. And that has resulted in what you see in Woodford Reserve today. And so all the expressions you see are things that Chris, not only did he think of, but he fought for them to become reality. And even Master's Collection, I mean, he had to fight to have Master's Collection be a thing, and for the executive leaders of our company to get on board. And he's like, well, it's just going to be a one-time a year release. We'll change it every year, and like not too much of a volume play. So we're not going to have to worry about how we're going to sell it. And all those things that he's taught me about, just he's had to fight all consistently. And that fight has been led to Woodford being a global brand, and also the philosophy of the brand. I think that's something that I just think is so amazing, is that what is carrying this brand at double-digit growth over the past 26 years is that it has a purpose. We have a true north. We know what we're doing. We're very thoughtful and mindful with our innovation, and it's not just going after what's trendy, but it's trend setting. And I think that is what is going to carry Woodford for the next 50, 100 years. Yeah, I mean, he is a true historian. Like I said, he was on the task force. We were happy to have him when we were going to build this official starting point of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, the Spirit of Kentucky Bourbon Exhibition. What does that mean? There's a lot that goes into it. And he was one of the really important people. And he is buttoned up on history, and he's, formal. So I want to talk a little bit about the ways that you are the same and the ways that you are different. Let's start with the things that you share, the similarities with Chris Morris. So the similarities are, we have the same values, I think, just in terms of being really hardworking people and put the brand first before ourselves. So it's always all about Woodford, and the reason why I am where I am is because of this brand that I work for, not just because, I work hard, but I'm here talking to you because I represent Woodford Reserve, not just because you want to have a fun conversation with me. And so Woodford is, we're always, grateful for that. And just a true respect and love for the bourbon industry and where it has been and where it's going. And so I think we've got the just values that are aligned.
For the record, I want to say that I would be happy to sit here and have this conversation with you. I don't know if we'd have an audience, but you and I could do this all day, every day. I don't know if anybody else would be on the call, but we'd be talking.
Yeah, they'd be like, "Who's it? Why am I talking to this person?" Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, so that's one of the things that I think he and I share that, and just we both love the Beatles, and there's some other like random things that he and I love history as well. I don't consider myself a historian as much as Chris. And I think what's so interesting about he and I is the generational gap between us. One of the funniest stories I tell about when I first started training with him was we sat down and did a tasting. I was tasting barrel samples, and I was like, Chris, I think, and I finally got the courage to really like talk about some of the weird flavors I would get in a glass, and I'm nosing it and I'm going, oh, I kind of get this bubble tape characteristic, like as like bubble tape. It just has all the sweet notes. And he looked at, Chris is the nicest man in the world. And he was like, oh, interesting. And when somebody says interesting or that's different, it's really not a good thing. Like my grandma used to say that all the time, like, that's different. You're like, oh no. And so I went back and I researched like, well, how could I be wrong? Like, why did I get bubble tape in this? And what was it about bubble tape that was so wrong?
But bubble tape, you mean like the gum that was on the paper, like that? Okay.
You say, that's it. That's the thing. It's like Chris Morris didn't know what bubble tape was. I should have said bubble tape, bubble gum. He would have understood. He thought I was talking about like bubble, like the plastic bubble wrap. And which would have been terrible to get in bourbon. And it's just funny because he was like, if you had said the bubble gum in my cards or, my baseball cards, he's just so different and so in that world. He still goes to the library and checks out library books, and he watches DVDs. I can't tell you the last time I watched a DVD. So there's these interesting, our generational differences are so interesting. And I'm so laid back. Like I can make a mistake and I'll screw up. I probably screwed up, I don't know how many times talking to you, just saying like, oh shoot, that was the wrong, whatever. And it doesn't bother me. I'm like, you make mistakes. But Chris would be more like, gotta be, he makes mistakes and he'll joke about it, but I let things roll off. I'm just kind of willy-nilly about it. And I like to be funny and joke, and that's just not as much of his personality. So, but we together, it's a funny combination, and I bring it out in him. I poke fun at him.
And I would guess for the brand, that's good, right? Because there are people who relate more closely to you, and there are people who relate more closely to Chris, and they all buy bourbon.
Yeah, exactly. That's Woodford. It's like we have a broad spectrum of people we're trying to reach. So we together, we make a good team.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Let's, should we dive into the cranberry?
Oh yeah. I love the cranberry. So,
by the way, if anybody watching needs any more of these, we've got a lot left. If anybody wants some cranberry, swing by.
Come on by. You got
some time in the next few weeks.
Yeah. So Chef Weta Michael is actually the chef who helped Chris Morris design this food pairing flavor wheel. And she used to always say a joke. She's like, this is the best day of this craisin's life. And being paired with Woodford Reserve. Because craisins get used, or dried cranberries get used in a lot of things. And being paired with Woodford's pretty darn good. So it's a wonderful pairing. It brings out all the jammy notes. So any kind of like cooked strawberry, I get like strawberry jam, jelly, obviously cranberry, but then raspberry, blueberry, cherry notes, all those different sort of berry things come out, and it's just a wonderful pairing.
I was thinking, like, I've heard the term fruit bomb, and that's what I experienced when I had the cranberry and then followed up with the outstanding Woodford Reserve.
It just takes that whole fruit category and just explodes it.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the palate.
Okay.
And officially, the palate is when you put your tongue to the roof of your mouth. That's officially what the palate is. But it is most often referred to as this ability to taste and distinguish one taste from another, to discard things that are not desirable and pinpoint things that are desirable. Has yours refined? And I would guess some of this came through your work in the lab where you could distinguish certain things that were desirable and others that maybe were not.
Yeah. So part of the training and part of being on the sensory panel for quality control is knowing what defects are in whiskey or any product that any of our, because Brown-Forman, we have vodka, we have tequila, so we have a lot of distilled spirits, Scotch, Irish whiskey. So we have a lot. So you need to know what defects do come up and how to identify them. So we actually train all of our panelists to pick up these specific defects. So when you see them, and we'll spike samples with it, and they are calibrated every single panel. We'll throw in a spiked sample. We call it a marker sample in our testing so that we know our panelists are paying attention and they're getting it. And if they don't get it, their data is thrown out of that panel. Their instrument is considered broken for that panel, and we don't utilize their data. So they
get fired.
They don't get fired. They can come back and try again in the
5 strikes and you're out, maybe.
No, but you do get rated. I mean, we monitor everybody. It's very intense, and I'm very proud of it because you have to, and we're all competitive. I mean, that's what I love. All of the R&D folks that participate in that panel are very competitive, and we want to make sure we get our marker samples. And so we'll go back and relook at them. So that's like the negative side. And then the positive side. So all of our attributes, like the qualitative sort of things, we have 15 different attributes that we look at on a scale of 1 to 15. And we rate whiskey on that. And when we do that quality descriptive analysis, we only look at 2 samples at a time because it's very overwhelming for your palate. So whiskey just has a lot going on. So you have to really limit the number of samples you taste to, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. Some people don't taste certain things. I mean, that's crazy to me, but it is a fact. And that also the way I describe one taste may be different than the way you describe that taste or distinguish that taste, because it really comes from our experiences. It comes from where we grew up, what we smelled at grandma's house or mom's house or whatever. So that to me is fascinating, but it makes that job really challenging. So is there a Zen master? Is there somebody you think, oh my gosh, that person has the best palate I've ever seen in my life?
I think that I don't think that there's not any one person that comes to mind that I'm like, I mean, Chris Morris has an amazing palate. But I think, and like Jackie Zykan, she's a really great palate as well. There are people that have really good palates. My colleagues in the R&D department, I mean, they are tasting whiskey all the time. They have phenomenal palates. So I feel like the folks that we work with should do quality control taste testing, and then the descriptive analysis have the best palates in town. I mean, they're phenomenal and probably could go up against some of the most well-respected palates out there.
And that's how you get the most balanced bourbon in the world. What are the red flags? What do you taste? What do you smell that you say, put that aside, let's check that batch and come back to that?
The number one for us at Brown-Forman, and particularly Woodford Reserve, the defect is the musty defect. So when I say musty, I think of mold. Think of when you have something, and I'm like, if you have fruit that has sat in your fridge and it's grown mold on it, and then you accidentally eat one, you didn't see it, and it lingers in your palate floods your entire olfactory system. It's like I used to have a fish tank and it had the algae on the back and it was just nasty. That I am extremely sensitive to that, if you haven't picked up on that. And that is something that is absolutely 100% not tolerated in a batch of Woodford Reserve. And we test for that. We look for it. It does not age out. You cannot get rid of it. You try to dilute it down by putting like 1 barrel in a large batch. You still will pick up on it, because when you add water, those mold spores just blossom and grow. And so that's the number one, but some people can't pick it up.
That's fascinating. So that quality control ensures that you get a perfect and balanced, and when you taste Woodford, it tastes the same every time. Where does that come from? Does that come from the grains originally? And is there any way to distill that out, or is it just like, that's a bad batch?
Yeah, so the moldy characteristic will come, it's not part of the production process. It is coming in through your grain. So for instance, if you have your grain silo, if you cleaned it out and moisture got in there somehow and your grain sits in there, it's going to get moldy. And that's where it starts. And it's just fascinating. You'll have moldy grain. And if you make whiskey with moldy grain, it carries throughout the entire production process. It does not get distilled out. It lingers in your distillate. So it is the worst thing. And it's one of those, it's a red flag, because it triggers a whole, well, everything does. Every quality defect we have triggers a whole look at like, okay, where did this come from? But mold is the one that's like huge. We got to nip it in the bud, because it doesn't age out. Others will.
Last question on this topic, and then we'll move on to taste our chocolate, because I know people want to get to their sweets, and I do too. Are you a better taster now than you were 5 years ago? Is it something you improve upon?
Yes, I definitely think it is. I think that you can train to have a good palate. I think the more that you expose yourself to different fruits and vegetables and spices and herbs and all those different things, it builds your vocabulary. So you have a good Rolodex to pull from. So when you're tasting, you can identify it. If you don't know what something is, you can't possibly identify it in a glass. For the longest time, I didn't know what marzipan was. I was like, what's marzipan? And then you realize what it is, you taste it, you're like, oh, and now I can identify it in a glass of Woodford. But if I don't know what it is, I can't identify. So yeah, you get better. And so everybody can train, everybody at home can train, and it's fun homework, tasting whiskey and tasting food.
We're in training right now, all of us.
Training right now.
Thank you. As is always the case with these programs, for those who are new to it, if you have any questions, I don't assume to know all the questions and have all the interest that people have. If you want to just type them in, Arla Precious Brewer is here, and she will relay those questions to me, and we'll get those questions answered before the program is out. Feel free to do so. Well, let's taste some chocolate.
All right. So chocolate is one I think is so surprising, because people think it's just going to be super sweet and all the things. And I think it actually has a tendency to do something different.
Is it important that it's a dark chocolate?
Yeah, it is. And you can pair any type of chocolate, but you're going to get a different flavor experience with white chocolate versus milk chocolate versus dark chocolate. So dark chocolate is what we have. And dark chocolate has a lot of bold spice richness to it. It also is sweet. So I want you to just take a small bite of your dark chocolate, let it fully coat your palate, and then take a sip of your Woodford bourbon. And want you to see, because Woodford bourbon, I think, has a lot of sweetness to it. And there's a lot of spice that you don't usually see. So when you take a sip, see if you see some of that spice coming out. Because
I get pepper.
Yep.
Right out of the gate.
Sharper on your palate. I think of like pepper, there's roasted coffee, the cedar wood, clove, like sharpness.
Yeah.
But as it lingers and you let it sit and you close your mouth, breathe out your nose, that's where those sweet aromatics start to come into play. Start to see that brown sugar, a little bit of that like vanilla bean character coming back.
Yeah, that's outstanding. I might have to have another one of those while you're answering the next question. So normally this program would be in person and we'd be celebrating with an audience of 100 people in the great hall downstairs. In a sense, you're a spokesperson for the brand. You're an ambassador for the brand. How has the pandemic, COVID-19, the last year plus impacted your job?
Well, it has impacted in the sense that I come live to people all around the world from my basement. This is my basement. So I now have a studio at home in the basement, and we can reach people in Australia or South Africa, Germany, all over the US, and do tastings from home. So that has been amazing. But it has forced us to shift and pivot how we do things, and we're not bringing people to the distillery right now, which is really sad because it's kind of our crown jewel and we love sharing our distillery and home place with everybody. So that's shifted it. And then also production wise, we were full on, we still have all these innovation things going on and they are on hold a little bit. We've still produced a master's collection this year with our production team. So I went out and was there for that and all that, but it's just been a total shift, and we're really looking forward to getting back to normal, whatever that looks like.
I read recently the effort to double production at Woodford Reserve. So is that, an unintended consequence? Is this the time now to, double up on the stills and produce more bourbon, or is that just a product of growth that's happening anyway?
That was just a product of growth. Woodford, we have outgrown our current production capacity, and we had known for years. There are so many times Chris and I would take people on tours of the distillery, and we'd have show people the reinforced pads on the cement floor of the distillery. Like, one day we will have stills here, and now it's happening. We've proven that we are growing. We need the capacity. We need it. So the distillery is doubling in capacity. We're going to have another set of pot stills along the wall. So when you walk down, you won't just see 3 pot stills on the one side. You'll have them on both sides, a mirror image. So that's just going to be, I've seen renderings of it, but to see it in person is going to be absolutely breathtaking. And it's just really exciting to see the growth, and then the growth within a National Historic Landmark. So maintaining the integrity of that site is another big chunk. And our engineering team have done an amazing job of configuring all this growth within this little building.
Yeah, if you haven't been out there, folks, I strongly encourage it when they open back up. It is beautiful getting there. You're just weaving through horse farms, and there's a farm right there at Woodford Reserve. Obviously a historic site. We actually have an Oscar Pepper still here in the Spirit of Kentucky bourbon exhibition that was dug up in 1994 when Brown-Forman bought that land and started producing the Woodford Reserve. Okay, let's get our spoons out, and then we'll get into my last couple of questions, and then some from our guests. And the spoons are to help us with our sorghum.
Sorghum. And a lot of people don't know what sorghum is. I didn't really know what it was either, being a native Cincinnatian. And then you come down here and it's like, people are like, oh, sorghum, you put it on your biscuits. So the sorghum pairing, so sorghum is like a molasses, but it's earthier. It has more earthy note. It's grassy. It has some kind of irony notes to it too, tea notes, deep dark fruit notes. It's sweet, but it has all this. It is a seamless pairing with Woodford Reserve. So you take your spoon, just take a little bit on your palate and let it coat your palate.
I use it in my old fashions.
Oh yeah, well, see, and I was gonna say you can make a simple syrup with it.
Mm-hmm.
That for our mint juleps a few years ago, and then. But yeah, we use it at the distillery. We use it as a sweetener in all of our cocktails because it's just such a wonderful pairing. And Chris Morris likes to call this the lie detector test because there are people that when they taste this, they get sweet aromatics. There are some that get spice notes, some that get wood or grain or the fruit notes. So it just kind of, wherever your palate tends to go is where it will go with this. And also think about the finish and how long it just pulls it out. And I think Weta said she timed it to like 45 seconds or something. I mean, it just keeps on going if you just let it sit for a while. So it's a wonderful pairing.
Oh yeah, I get a nice floral type experience on the finish. Smell the flowers.
Yeah.
Let's get to a couple of our guest questions. One of the questions, can you tell us a little bit about the new batch proof release? Our guest hasn't had the opportunity to try that yet. I haven't either. So
yes, 128.3 proof. It is Woodford Reserve Distiller Select Bourbon on steroids. It has wonderful, rich oak characteristics, beautiful vanillas, like sweet aromatics that come out, dried dark fruit. It really is wonderful. I remember Chris and I sitting down virtually like this, tasting together and writing our taste notes. And it was like late in the afternoon and we're both just like, what a great way to end our busy day of just talking about 128.3 proof Woodford Reserve. Pretty good.
First time I ever had the opportunity to taste bourbon right out of the barrel was at Woodford Reserve. And oh my goodness, it's before it's to proof, and it is an amazing experience.
It is an experience for sure.
This question, are either of you an executive bourbon steward, part of the Bourbon Women, or any other bourbon social group? I am a Bourbon Stave and Thief certified and in the Bourbon Society, and I'll let you take your answer from there.
I am a certified specialist of spirits, and I'm a member of the Order of the Writ, which is my Order of the Writ glass.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, and those are my official, I guess, affiliations. And then I've done stuff with Bourbon Women. They're amazing, whiskey chicks, all of the things. So yeah, I'm not officially, I guess, a member, but I've worked with them on different things.
And for those who don't know, the Order of the Writ Room is here as part of our partnership with the Kentucky Distillers Association. That ceremony happens here, and it's kind of a secret order of bourbon Zen masters, and Elizabeth is one of them. When were you initiated into the Order?
2019.
Congratulations on that. That's a big deal. Some pretty big names you're involved with. Does that ever blow you away? I mean,
all the time, Andy. I mean, come on. I'm like, should I really be here right now? But I am, so I guess I am. But yeah.
Well, you're holding your own just fine and doing a great job. So thank you. This question, what about cigars? How do they influence the different notes of bourbon?
Ooh, so cigars. I work with a lot of different accounts that will say we do cigars here. We want a bourbon that will stand up to that. And cigars are big. They have a lot of flavor. Plus, you're getting smoke in your mouth, which really can kill a lot of the flavor you're getting in your whiskey. You're not going to get all the subtleties. So you need to go for something that's big and bold. So like double oaked has a lot of just very obvious flavor. Really good with that. Our batch proof would be amazing. I mean, so you can pair them. And I think and I'm not a cigar connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that I know that there are different flavor profiles with the cigars. So I think you can pair them as well. I know people do it. And if that's what you like go for it. I say drink bourbon how you like it.
Mm-hmm. We're all learning, and you have had the opportunity to learn on the job through Chris and so many others. But now you're kind of emerging as one of the leaders, and that's been a transition. People come to you for advice, and they look to you, and you are the people doing these programs. So I'll give you the opportunity to shed some light. Anything we can be excited about coming up in the future for Woodford Reserve? And I know Brown-Forman doesn't like you telling those in programs like ours here today, but maybe a little hint.
Yeah, we have a lot of really cool stuff coming out. I think the Distillery Series. So for everybody, you all are probably here in town. If you're here in the state of Kentucky, you can go to Woodford and look at our Distillery Series. And all I can say about it is we went back and forth over the name, but it is whiskey that we produced right after we made our chocolate malted rye bourbon masters collection. And it has character of that. So if you were a fan of that, you're going to be a fan of this bourbon. And that's coming out this summer. But then Master's Collection next year is going to be really cool. It's going to be a change on the grain recipe and something nobody has. I mean, our Master's Collection is usually something nobody has ever seen. And this is really something nobody has ever seen before. And it's really, really cool. Think of beer when you think of this year's Master's Collection. So that's all I can say. And then I did my first distillation production this year and I was so proud because our distillery manager is another woman in the industry, and she and I were like, how cool, like she just started and this is new for me. So we were really excited that this is the first time we did this together and figured our way through it. And with the production team, our operators are awesome, so they get credit, too, on helping us navigate. But it was really cool to get that done. So we produced a new distillate. See that in like 10 years.
I mean, there are so many trade secrets here, and people probably back you into the corner like, tell me, come on, tell me, come on, tell me. Are you like sworn to secrecy on some of these things? It's just about your contract, or is that your just professional way of doing business?
I just don't want my boss, Mark, to yell at me.
Me either. Me
So,
either.
I just want to keep him happy, and it's Derby season, so I know he's already stressed out with that. So I'm not going to say anything else, Andy. All I can do is allude to it's going to be amazing and look for it. And it's a grain recipe change for this next Master's Collection. And we have like the next 10 years planned out too. So we have a lot going for us.
All right. Well, you have been amazing tonight. So I want to thank you very much. I want to let the folks who are watching know that we're going to announce our next bourbon program in the coming weeks, and it's going to be a barrel selection. It's really exciting. We're going to tell you about that in a bit. But first, another topic on some things that may interest some of you, a different program, not a bourbon program, that's coming up on May 25th. It's one of our Let's Talk Bridging the Divide programs. It will be hosted by myself and our Rachel Platt. The topic is jumpstarting downtown Louisville, and you can bet that conversation is going to be lively. Louisville has gone through a really challenging year for a couple of reasons, but there are signs of people coming back and investing in this great city that we all love. So that's going to be a great conversation. I welcome you all to join us for that. With that, I want to thank all of our guests for joining us tonight. But most importantly, Elizabeth, you have been outstanding. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I hope that you have a wonderful Kentucky Derby this year.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, folks. Have a great night. We'll see you next time.